Science shouldn't feel like a closed door. Welcome to Human Verified, your backstage pass to the world of high stakes research and the business of staying alive. My name is Gina Winchester, a Native American scientist, professor, author, and I've created this space where we swap dense academic jargon for fresh, no nonsense insights. Whether I'm deconstructing pharmaceutical breakthroughs, clinical trials, or the how this is legal side of STEM business, I'm here to bridge the gap between the lab bench and your daily life. It's rigorous research met with real world storytelling because understanding how science works is the ultimate power move.
Zaza Dispos are evolving. Cannabis is big business. Once upon a time, the use of cannabis was a blight on the country. While guns and alcohol were acceptable, cannabis use was demonized. Largely based on racism against Mexican culture, cannabis propaganda and misinformation spread far and wide. But things have changed. Expanded usages in the medical industry, coupled with strict regulations and controlled access, have flipped the script entirely. Back in 2011, the legal cannabis market was barely a blip on the radar. It was a quiet, fragile, cash only medical experiment operating under the constant threat of federal raids. Back then, recreational dispensaries did not even exist, and only 15 states, plus Washington, D.C., allowed medical marijuana at all. In fact, just two states, California and Colorado, made up nearly all of the country's legal sales, bringing the entire national market to a modest 1.7 billion. It was a highly localized, risky business that relied on a small network of growers and caretakers, contributing almost nothing to the public tax funds or widespread employment. This is when I first obtained a medical marijuana card in SoCal. It was in 2011 that my spinal column and repeated stress injuries began to take hold. The pain, though not as severe as it would become, was intense. Medical marijuana gave me a chance to endure the pain and rest in a way that helped me get up and do what I needed to do every day. Like so many, even today, there was only one other choice besides Oxycontin and Percocets, and that was cannabis. Fast forward to today, and that fractured medical niche has exploded into a mainstream economic Goliath that rivals traditional everyday consumer goods. Nearly 80% of Americans live in a county with at least one dispensary, and 24 states have fully legalized adult recreational use. This dramatic reposition has pushed annual legal revenues to nearly 47 billion. When you factor in the real estate, construction, tech, and supply chains supporting the industry, its broader economic impact reaches a staggering 149 billion. This explosive growth has completely transformed the American workforce and state budgets. The industry now supports over 425,000 steady full-time jobs across farming, retail, science, and compliance. State governments are bringing in roughly 25 billion in annual tax revenue, outpacing alcohol taxes in several states. With the federal government even moving to soften its old restrictions, cannabis has officially evolved from a shaky legal gamble into a permanent multi-billion-dollar force in the American economy. So let's take a look at the current cannabis laws and the hearings later this month that could change everything. After all, cannabis is big business. It's about more than getting zooted on gas. Almost everyone in America agrees that the plant should be legal in some capacity. In fact, nearly 9 out of 10 adults believe it should be available, whether that is for both fun and medical use, or just strictly for medical reasons. roughly half of all Americans have tried cannabis at least once in their lives. The country is now evenly split on the laws, with half the states allowing recreational use and the other half restricting it to just medical access. Behind all of this is a multi-billion-dollar economy that is finding its footing while undergoing some serious growing pains. Even though legal sales topped a staggering 25.8 billion last year, the Wild West era of opening up a shop on every corner is just winding down. The number of active business licenses has been dropping for nearly 2 years. The market is consolidating as bigger, more established brands take over. At the same time, the government is stepping in to tighten up rules on the industry. A new federal law is set to kick in later this year that effectively shuts down the hemp loophole by putting a strict cap on the total milligrams of THC allowed in a product. It will essentially ban most of those intoxicating hemp-derived gummies and drinks that flooded the market. On top of that, tribal nations are increasingly carving out their own unique spaces. We have to navigate a complicated web of state and federal laws to run our own independent, sovereign cannabis markets. My tribe, the Pokagon Band of Potawatomi, owns a dispensary located on our tribal lands called Rolling Embers. Michigan has recreational use at the state level, and my tribe has legalized use on tribal lands. We have a storefront in the main area with a luxurious outdoor seating area where you can commune with friends while listening to live music. I'm a big fan. Perhaps the most surprising twist in modern cannabis culture is who is actually using it. There has been a dramatic surge in cannabis use among senior citizens and particularly older women. Despite the obvious risks of smoking anything, there is a strong protective power in a basic healthcare connection. People who manage to get a routine medical checkup once a year are much less likely to fall into risky substance abuse patterns, proving that when people feel supported by the healthcare system, they are better equipped to navigate their health and well-being. Decriminalizing medical cannabis to Schedule 3. Right now, we are watching a historic change in how medical science and government policy handle cannabis and psychedelic therapies. I discussed some of these changes in the Human Verified editorial, "The FDA Be Trippin'." In that editorial, I focus on the changes in medical psychedelic applications, and here I will review how those changes affect cannabis. For decades, researchers were stuck in a frustrating loop. They couldn't run clinical trials because the government labeled these substances too dangerous to study. But they couldn't prove the drugs were safe and effective without running those trials. Now that cycle is broken, completely rewriting the rules for treating physical and mental health. The biggest catalyst for cannabis came when the DOJ officially moved state-licensed medical marijuana and FDA-approved cannabis medications into a less restrictive category called Schedule 3. While that might sound like old men jargon, it completely changes the game for scientists. This single decision has essentially split the world of cannabis research into two totally different tracks based entirely on what the final product is meant to do. If a scientist is focusing strictly on medical treatments or clinical drugs, their job just got a whole lot easier. Researchers no longer have to jump through strict, frustrating hoops that the government usually reserves for dangerous, illegal street drugs. They can study the plant, run trials, and develop life-changing treatments. But they won't have to suffer through the suffocating red tape, heavy security requirements, and specialized storage mandates that used to stall clinical progress for years. Furthermore, scientists have a fast pass to buy and study the actual real-world products being sold to patients right now in state medical programs. They don't have to wait months to get low-grade samples from a single government-approved farm. But there is a major catch. Recreational marijuana is not suddenly legal across the country. Not yet. If you're researching cannabis intended for adult use, or if you are running a recreational dispensary, you are still stuck in the past. Recreational cannabis, bulk marijuana, and unlicensed crops are still trapped under the strictest possible rules. The government has essentially drawn a sharp line in the sand between medicine and recreation. If you want to study or sell in the recreational market, you still need heavy duty federal registration, which keeps that side of the industry completely cut off from medical breakthroughs. The good news is that this dividing line might not last forever. To figure out what to do with the rest of the market, the government has scheduled an official hearing to evaluate the parts of the plant still stuck in the strict Schedule 1 category. The DOJ essentially wiped the slate clean on previous legal proceedings to handle things more efficiently. They're resetting the clock on evidence to decide whether all remaining types of cannabis, including the recreational side and the bulk supply chain, should be decriminalized. If that happens, it could blow the doors wide open for science and business across the entire industry. Next could be decriminalizing adult recreational cannabis. Next week, on June 29th, 2026, the DEA will host a formal federal hearing to decide whether to move all remaining forms of cannabis out of the strictest drug category, Schedule 1. Just like medical cannabis in April 2026, they would move into a much more lenient Schedule 3 category. Because the government is under immense pressure to get this settled, the meeting is on an incredibly tight schedule. It kicks off at 9 a.m. at a special facility in Arlington, Virginia, and the law requires the entire process to wrap up completely by July 15th, 2026. The people involved have to rush to get ready, with strict deadlines to turn in their short opening arguments and share their evidence just days before the event begins. Not surprisingly, the meeting is already causing a huge uproar in the cannabis world because of who is actually allowed to speak. When the government released the official guest list, people noticed a glaring bias as every single one of the 7 approved participants is openly against changing the drug laws. The lineup includes anti-legalization groups, representatives from states like Nebraska and Idaho, and drug screening organizations. Major cannabis business groups and scientific advocates have been completely locked out. Critics are calling the selection incredibly unfair, arguing that the meeting will completely miss out on crucial facts, scientific research, and real-world business expertise. Adding to the tension is the man in charge of the whole event, Chief Judge Derek C. Julius. He used to be a high-ranking lawyer for the DEA, and his old office was previously accused of trying to quietly block cannabis reform behind the scenes. I want to note here that these are rumors. We don't know if this will be bias in the hearings one way or another. But we do know that the Trump administration has taken the stance that it wishes to decriminalize the industry. While Chief Judge Julius's rumored past has people in the industry feeling very nervous, the judge is under strict, direct orders from the White House to push this process through as fast as humanly possible. Meaning, he can't drag it out. During this upcoming hearing, Judge Julius will put recreational cannabis through a strict public health test that looks at just 8 specific factors. These include its potential for abuse, how it affects the body, and its overall risk to society. If other voices are eventually allowed to speak, cannabis trade associations will want to present evidence on how keeping recreational marijuana in Schedule 1 hurts businesses economically. Scientists and public health researchers would present data on safety and abuse risks, while civil liberties groups would testify about the unfair real world consequences of aggressive enforcement. Even though this hearing is a major step forward, it is just the beginning of a long, bureaucratic marathon. After all the evidence is heard, the judge will make a recommendation. The DEA chief will issue a final order, and that decision will likely face challenges in the court. Because of the lengthy process, recreational cannabis businesses should buckle up for a few more years of legal uncertainty before any rules are set in stone. The stakes for this meeting are incredibly high for scientists and business owners alike. Right now, universities and laboratories have to jump through endless bureaucratic hoops and get rare, heavily guarded government permits just to study the cannabis people buy in stores. If the judge recommends moving everything to Schedule 3, it will break down those barriers, allowing researchers to freely run medical trials on real world products and high potency concentrates. These changes could also give tax relief to recreational business owners. They would finally be able to deduct normal business expenses like employee labor and specialized equipment from their taxes, just like any other company. Cannabis is big business. Current changes to the cannabis industry have been years in the making. Since 2020, a revamping of federal policy, major corporate reorganizations, and historic milestones on Wall Street have reshaped the financial reality for dispensaries. While the broader recreational market gets a lot of attention, the medical cannabis sector remains a vital financial engine. Its economic impact goes far beyond what happens at the dispensary counter. Medical cannabis drives investments in real estate for high tech growing facilities, creates specialized laboratory and testing jobs, and brings in hefty tax revenues for state governments. Between 2020 and 2024, this medical sector added a stabilizing foundation for big multi state companies. Even in states where full recreational legalization faced major hurdles, like Florida's high profile 2024 vote, which won majority support, but it just missed the supermajority needed to pass, the underlying medical system stayed highly profitable and resilient. For years, cannabis companies faced a major financial handicap because major American stock exchanges completely banned these businesses from listing their shares. Companies were forced to raise money through smaller, over the counter markets or look to secondary exchanges in Canada. The financial isolation finally came to an end just a couple of weeks ago. Following the federal decision to reclassify state licensed medical marijuana to the less restrictive Schedule 3 category, Florida-based Trulieve Cannabis Corporation pulled off a high-stakes corporate reorganization. By separating its operations to focus entirely on its medical side, Trulieve cleared the strict regulatory hurdles required by major domestic stock markets. On June 10, 2026, Trulieve became the first U.S. cannabis company to debut on the New York Stock Exchange under the ticker symbol TRLV. This historic move completely upends the playing field. It will now have access to a gigantic pool of traditional institutional investors, increasing stock liquidity and opening the door for large operators to follow suit. It's a major financial win for the medical cannabis industry because the government now formally acknowledges its medical use. This recognition lowers the perceived risk for investors, paving the way for serious cash to flow into the industry. All in all, a fledgling cannabis industry that no one believed in 15 years ago has found its way into mainstream America. It has jumped through the unimaginably difficult hurdles needed to bring about this kind of change. And it did so all on its own, despite all the pushback. Cannabis is big business, and it's about to get a whole lot bigger. Thank you for spending this time with me today.